All right, White House officials announced this week that President Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping plan to meet next week at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in San Francisco. And according to his advisors, President Biden is hoping that this meeting will stabilize the relations between the two countries. But frankly, given the many topics of disagreement and recent incidents that have further strained our relations, the question is out there, what outcome can we really expect? Well, joining me now to discuss this is Chang. He's the Distinguished Senior Fellow at the Gatestone Institute. He's also the author of The Coming Collapse of China and recently released China is Going to War. You can follow him on X under the handle @GordonG.Chang. Gordon, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always great to have you.
Thank you so much, Jody.
Well, listen, let me just toss it out here for you. Give me your basic thoughts on next week's meeting between President Biden and Xi Jinping.
This meeting should not be held. It's not going to result in any advantage for the United States. You know, we've been talking to China intensively for 3 decades. And all over that time, China's behavior has only worsened. And so the question is, is it responsible to continue a policy that has failed for such a long period? What more can Biden actually say to the Chinese that hasn't been said up to now? So I believe that we should stop talking, impose severe costs for clearly unacceptable behavior, and just tell the Chinese, we're done with it.
Yeah, that would be a great way to go into to approach this whole thing. Let me ask you, Gordon. I was kind of surprised at this meeting. Were there any hints that you were aware that this meeting was going to take place, or does it seem to be kind of a spur of the moment thing?
The Biden administration has been desperate to establish channels of communication, as they say. And they did send 4 cabinet-level officers to Beijing, starting with Secretary of State Anthony Blinken in June. So, this is what they've wanted. And finally, the Chinese deigned to grant it. So, right now you have Xi Jinping pulling the strings because Biden is just so happy that he's get the opportunity to speak to the Chinese dictator.
Yeah, that is a great point that you brought out. This whole thing seems to be happening on their watch, under their time, under their wishes. They are leading this whole thing. It's not, unfortunately, the United States leading. Let me throw something out that is a concern very much to me, and I think to our viewers and listeners as well. But this meeting is taking place almost a year from the last time that these two met in Indonesia. And, they spoke, as you mentioned, the need for more communication and all that sort of stuff. But since that meeting last year, the tensions have only risen. I mean, we had the Chinese spy balloon going across our country, gathering information. We had the espionage attempts in the United States, all this kind of stuff. What do we really expect here? And even the Taiwan situation, is that even going to come up next week, do you think?
I'm sure that the Chinese will raise it because they want the Biden administration to reduce our contacts with the island republic. But something that our president should raise is the Philippines, because at Second Thomas Shoal, China's engaged in increasingly belligerent activity, despite written warnings from our State Department that we are prepared to use force to defend our ally under the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty. And yet that has had no effect on the Chinese, which means deterrence has failed. So it would seem to me that the Philippines has got to be at the top of the list. Now, I don't know if Biden will talk about it. The problem here is that he probably doesn't want to raise a lot of issues that will anger the Chinese, because American officials think, well, if we anger the Chinese, they'll stop talking to us, and that would be a disaster. Well, no, it wouldn't. I think it would be a great thing. But the point is, that's not the way official Washington thinks. That's certainly not the way the State Department thinks, and it's not the way that Biden thinks.
Yeah, and but it is the pathway that this administration approaches everything. when it relates to our enemies. It's appease, appease, appease. And somehow we think if we don't offend someone, they'll like us and they'll cooperate. But it just simply does not work that way. And that is precisely, in my opinion, one of the primary reasons we are seeing so much an uprising worldwide on so many different fronts. So you've mentioned some great things here. Just lay it out for our viewers and listeners. What are you concerned about? What concerns do you have as the meeting next week is apparently coming? You've said it shouldn't, in your opinion, happen at all. So with that, what are your primary concerns?
The greatest concern is something that we have seen over and over again over the course of these 3 decades, and that is that we delay taking action that absolutely necessary to defend the United States and Americans because we want to have dialogue with China. So, for instance, take fentanyl. They're going to set up a working group on fentanyl. Well, we don't need a working group. We know exactly what's going on, Jody. The Communist Party fully supports the fentanyl gangs. Those gangs could not operate in a near total surveillance state without the approval of Xi Jinping himself. And these gangs, they launder their money through the Chinese state banking system, and China's diplomats give them official cover. So we know what's going on. At least Biden should know what's going on. You know, what we should have is what President Trump did in April 2017 at Mar-a-Lago when Xi Jinping was there. You know, Trump got up during the dinner after that beautiful chocolate cake, as President Trump said, and he announced, look, I've launched missiles on Syria, which, by the way, is a China proxy. And Xi Jinping was taken aback, and he was relatively well behaved during the 4 years of the Trump administration. That's what we need to do. If we do that, then maybe we have some path forward with the Communist Party, but not certainly with the policies that Biden has been implementing.
Well, there are so many concerns, you know, not the least of which is a potential compromise that this president may have with the Chinese. And I mean, there's just so many things. I couldn't agree with you more that this is one of those meetings that should not even be taking place. Gordon Chang, thank you so much for coming on Washington Watch. We appreciate it a great deal.